All right, so yesterday Australia had their federal election in which they elect their House of Representatives, and Tony Abbott, the leader of the Liberal Party, which in British terms is a Conservative party,
Very confusing.
if that makes sense, won 88 seats to Labour's 57 seats, Labour being the incumbent government. So that means Tony Abbott is now the Prime Minister of Australia. Jazza, what?
I read a lead on the BBC that said it's now Tony time.
Tony time, are those his own words?
I believe that's the tagline that they're going. So Tony Blair was education, 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 and Tony Abbott is it's Tony time.
It's like a rubbish.
Obviously stealing it from the X Factor contestant Chico with his Chico time. I think.
I thought it was more it's hammer time sort of reference.
Oh no, yeah, I suppose that's the original insert name here time phrase. But anyway, moving swiftly on from the taglines used by British press to cover Australian media. What do you think? You know how we'll talk about my opinions of Tony Abbott in a minute. But what do you think of Tony Abbott as a politician? Do you think that he won it, or did Labour lose it? Do you reckon?
There's this whole thing of like governments don't win elections, parties lose them or whatever. I'm not sure I entirely believe that. I mean, I guess you can only compete against the other runners in the race, so there's always an element of that. But it does seem to me that, I mean, he won a significant majority. It wasn't just a slender one.
Oh yeah, landslide.
And I guess you can look at it as, so the previous government had 4 years to actually prove itself, and obviously the Australian public is unimpressed. So you can look at it that way, but it does seem as though he's won.
I think the shame is, though, that the Australian Party wasn't so much unimpressed by the policies of Labour. I saw a couple of soundbites after Julia Gillard got kicked out as the PM and replaced by Kevin Rudd. That things like carbon tax, although it splits the population quite a lot, it was relatively popular. Julia Gillard's education reforms were also very, very popular. There's been I've read a lot of stuff about the fact that Australia managed to avoid the global recession, and because of a lot of mineral wealth that they have, and that Labour are said to have not capitalised on that to the same extent, to the extent that they probably should have. I don't really buy that very much. I'm not sure.
Before the recession kicked in, there were 11 years of Liberal government under a guy whose surname was Howard, but I can't remember his first name. And I've read that the reason that Australia coped so well during the recession was because of the surplus that the Liberal government had built up in those 11 years, between, I think it was the 90s to mid-noughties or whatever. So I guess you could look at it in those terms, that the Liberals had a good run then, and now they're being brought back in because they're not, the Australians are unimpressed with Labour. But I think
that they were just unimpressed with the. I love reading about Australian politics because so much shit goes down. It's so, like, people are stabbing each other in the back, misogyny left, right and centre, they're turning boats away on their borders. They had one candidate who was the national candidate who thought that Islam or Islam was a country or something like that. Like, it's fascinating because there's so many batshit crazy people. But and I can understand why you would kick out a government if that was their perception, like internationally and also in their own country. So I think that Labour definitely did lose it, because are you
trying to say Labour lost it, or do you think Rudd lost it?
Oh no, yeah, Labour lost it.
But you don't think it's particularly down to Rudd as opposed to Gillard?
I think that Gillard and Rudd, on their own, I think they are both very competent politicians. And look out for Kevin Rudd. I reckon he'll be running the UN at some point. I'm not even joking. I genuinely think that he will be like a Secretary General one day. But I think that it wasn't about a policy, which is always a shame in elections. It was an election about the personalities and the drama that has happened around those personalities.
I mean, if you think that's the case, though, surely it doesn't speak very well for Australians in general, given what we know about Tony Abbott.
What do we know about Tony Abbott, Jimmy?
What don't we know about Tony Abbott, Jazza?
He's a bit of a dick, isn't he?
Are we allowed to say that?
I'm sorry. It's YouTube. We can say whatever the bloody hell we want. Sorry to any Australians who voted for him. I'm sure that you're going to be very happy with him as Prime Minister. But the way that he has been covered, obviously the BBC and our press is quite liberal. And some of the stuff that he's come out with as the leader of the as the Prime Minister in waiting, basically, I think that he's just a bit of a knob.
Do you want to expand upon that, or just keep replacing words?
Well, when he was opposite Julia Gillard, there was very clearly an anti-female feel to a lot of the conversations that he had with her. He was very happy to endorse like campaigns against her, like Ditch the Witch. His party were incredibly insensitive to stuff like allegations that her husband was actually gay because he was a hairdresser. There was a menu at a Liberal Party fundraiser that said that that had a course called Julia Gillard Quail, Kentucky Fried Quail, with big thighs, big arse, and like a big red box and stuff that was it was disgusting. The way that he's interacted with women on the campaign trail as well. He went up to one girl who was attractive, who happened to work in a factory, and went, "Oh, I bet you." Sorry for the accent, by the way. "I bet you're very popular with all the boys here." And she was like, "Not really, no." And it's just cringeworthy stuff that is. And that, like, I've seen quite a few commentators who are Australians but are based in the UK. Who are like, they feel like his attitude is taking the country back to the 1950s.
He sounds like a sort of pervy old uncle type of character. Is that
yeah.
fair?
I think that, well, I feel like, see, this is probably one of the reasons that Australians were a bit fed up with the Labour Party, because it's all about the personalities. I don't think that a lot of Australians probably know the policies of the Liberal Party. A lot of it seems like he's just going to be taking back all of the laws that were put in the Gillard and Rudd government. So they're going to revoke the carbon tax. They're going to take away a lot of the educational reforms that they put in. And so the next, I'm not sure if they have fixed parliaments, but the next however many years, I reckon that it looks like they're going to be defined by Abbott taking back all of the policies that Labour put in place.
Do you not think, though, that it's quite likely that there is a large group of people in Australia who do approve of those sorts of policies, though? I mean, if there was a similar figure in this country, there would be in the UK, I mean, there would be a large group of people who would support things like that.
Yes, I think there probably is, but he hasn't had to come up with it very much himself. The only thing that I may be wrong, if I'm incorrect, tell us in the comments. But the only thing that I've heard him have an original thought about that wasn't repealing a Labour Party law is his stance on immigration, which does very much seem to be we're just going to escort boats that try and land on Australia away from us.
Well, what do you think about that? Do you think what policy would you actually put forward in response to that? Because we have our own immigration. It's
a very different. So the reason that I think that this is an important election for us to pay attention to is because there is a lot of crossover in the way that the UK and Australia deal with things internationally, and the UK. Well, politicians in the UK often use Australia as an example of how to regulate your own borders. We have very different relationships with our immediate neighbours to Australia. Australia is a very developed country, bordering countries that are still developing. our neighbours are the European Union.
Yes.
And France. I think that... So I'm going to avoid making comments on Australian immigration policy, because obviously the immigration that I'm aware of as a Brit is not on a par with the same kind of immigration and asylum that often gets people's blood boiling in Australia. So I'm gonna stop short of sharing my opinion on that, if you don't mind. How about you? Do you want to make some people angry?
I don't know. I mean, I suppose all the same arguments apply as far as immigration goes. It's about the overstretching of services, and there's also an element of cultural preservation, which in a country such as Australia is even more ironic than it is in Britain.
It is a little bit, isn't it?
But I don't understand how people can oppose asylum seekers.
We used to drink bottle gins and the whole